Okay, so what is Tartarus? Reading from 2 Peter chapter 2 and verse 4. Certainly if God did not hold back from punishing the angels that sinned, but by throwing them into Tartarus, delivered them to pits of dense darkness to be reserved for judgment. Here Peter refers to the first book of Enoch, chapter 10 and verse 4, where the archangels chain the angels that sinned and place them or threw them into Tartarus. But note that Peter is using if. If the angels sinned, then. It does not mean that Peter is presenting the first book of Enoch as historical fact, only that he is presenting a logical argument. His conclusion then comes in verse 9. The Lord knows how to deliver the godly out of temptations and to reserve the unjust unto the day of judgment to be punished. So what does the word Tartarus mean? Well, the word Tartarus is a Greek word that is normally translated hell or the deep in some translations of the Bible, or most translations of the Bible. Only very few translations will actually render it as Tartarus. It is not used in the Hebrew scriptures, but it is used in the Greek translation of the Hebrew scriptures. In the book of Job it occurs a couple of times. Those of you who want to look it up, it's Job chapter 14 verse 15 and Job 41 verse 31 and 32. The numbers may be different in the Greek translation, the verse numbers, that is. So in Job chapter 40 and verse 15, in the Greek translation it becomes Job chapter 40 and verse 20, and in chapter 41 in the Greek translation it will be verses 23 and 24. So Tartarus is a Greek word, and if you want to look up the meaning of this word, if you look in Strong's Concordance, the concordance number is 5020, and the word basically means the deepest abyss of Hades, to cast down to hell. It is the name of a subterranean region, gloomy and dark, regarded by the ancient Greeks as the abode of the wicked dead, where they suffer punishment for their evil deeds. It is equivalent to the Hebrew Gehenna, or Gehenna of the Jews. Right, getting back to what I was saying about the word Tartarus being used in the book of Job in the Greek translation of the Hebrew scriptures, the Septuagint. From reading these passages it becomes quite clear that the word Tartarus is being used figuratively, and its only real interpretation could be the abode of the wicked. As in Greek mythology, Tartarus represents an underground prison as far below Hades as earth is below heaven. Certainly if God did not hold back from punishing the angels that sinned, but by throwing them into Tartarus delivered them to pits of dense darkness to be reserved for judgment. The Greek word for hell in 2 Peter chapter 2 and verse 4 is Tartarus. In popular mythology, Tartarus meant lower than hell, that is Hades. This is exactly where Korah, Dathan and others went when swallowed up by the earth. See the Bible, the Dictionary of the Bible that was published in 1963, page 319. So let's try now and do a more detailed study of 2 Peter chapter 2 and verse 4. Let's start off with the phrase, the angels that sinned. Now, the Greek word for angel, angelos, also means messenger or agent. and is used of both human and divine messengers. It is used of humans in the following passages: Matthew chapter 11 and verse 10, Luke chapter 7 and verse 24 and 27, Luke chapter 9 and verse 52, and the letter of James chapter 2 and verse 25. The term sons of gods refers to divine angels as well as to humans in Deuteronomy chapter 14 and verse 1, Psalm 82 and verse 6, the book of Hosea chapter 1 and verse 10, Luke chapter 3 and verse 38, John chapter 1 and verse 12, first letter of John chapter 3 and verse 1. Here Peter is drawing attention to a well-known incident of divine judgment in which God spared not those who had been placed in authority. This could and most likely does relate to the rebellion of Korah, Dathan and others recorded in Numbers chapter 16. Moved by personal pride, these men who had been set in high authority affected other famous princes of the assembly, the Hebrew word for ecclesia or church, and accused Moses and Aaron of taking too much upon them. Yahweh vindicated his chosen leader and high priest, however, and punished the rebellious in unique fashion. The earth opened her mouth and swallowed up all the rebels and then closed itself over them. It was a manifestation of divine judgment that vindicated divine authority, and yet there was careful discrimination in punishment. For though the families of most of the rebels suffered with their fathers, the children of Korah were saved to ultimately rise to occupy a position of importance in the service of Yahweh. So this well-known incident in Israel's history points the lesson Peter is emphasizing. The Lord knows how to deliver the godly out of temptations and to reserve the unjust unto the day of judgment to be punished. As I read before from 2 Peter chapter 2 and verse 9. So Peter's example here shows the effects that can come from fleshly pride and ambition, whilst it also shows that God is merciful in judgment. The angels in this passage therefore are human and not divine angels. This is proven by the following. The wage of sin is death, Romans chapter 6 and verse 23. If divine angels were sinners, they would die. But Jesus said angels do not die, Luke chapter 20 and verse 36. Therefore the angels which sinned were human and not divine angels. There is evidence that the human angels were 250 princes of the Israelite congregation, which were led in rebellion by Korah. Consider the following. They were angels, angelos, since they were assigned to minister to the congregation, Numbers chapter 16 and verse 9. Their first estate or principality was that of princes or leaders, Numbers chapter 16 and verse 2. They left their former estate when they sought the priesthood, Numbers chapter 16 and verse 10. They were delivered into chains of darkness when they were swallowed alive by the earth, Numbers 16 verse 31 to 33. They were sinners in attempting to acquire the priesthood for themselves, Numbers chapter 16 and verse 10 and 38. The judgment is that which will be administered by Christ, 2 Timothy chapter 4 and verse 1. Those who opposed Moses in this rebellion were called the sons of Levi, Numbers chapter 16 and verse 8. We find in the book of Malachi chapter 2 and verse 7 that the Levitical priests were also called messengers, angelos of Yahweh. Chains of darkness. Other translations render this pit in accordance with the oldest manuscripts instead of chains or cords. The Greek word signifies an underground granary, which certainly answers to the judgment described in Numbers chapter 16 and verse 33. Reserved unto judgment. The rebellious princes in Israel, who despised the position of responsibility granted them and denied the right of Moses to exercise authority over them, will yet be brought forth from their graves onto the judgment seat of the Lord Jesus Christ when he returns at the second coming to judge both the faithful and the unfaithful.